So Gail, thank you for having this idea and organizing this presentation. Is there any more you'd like to say in introducing Chet, or maybe what led to this?
Well, yeah, we were talking about this as a hot topic at our the last Resilient Communities and Tourism conference call, and so I just talked with Linda about getting in touch with Chet to see what he might have to present for us. All right. Well, once again, thank you, Chet, for joining us and doing all of this research and your continued interest in Greater Minnesota and what we can do to promote Greater Minnesota, I guess. So thank you for joining us, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for having me. I am a resident of Greater Minnesota, living in Crow Wing County, and I live in just outside of Brainerd. So yes, this issue is important to me, you know, professionally, but also personally. And in addition to being a regional analyst for DEED, I am also on region because I see that this area of our, you know, collective work, I think, is going to be a lot more. We're going to focus on it a lot more for probably the next at least 10 years. I think this is going to be a real important part of the work we do at RSDP. So we're all just kind of figuring out how to really take on, especially the resilient community part of that discussion. And so I hope some of the stuff we've already looked at, you know, helps you guys as you're kind of thinking through, you know, how to tackle this issue up in your area. But I gotta say, I gotta excuse me a little bit. I have a bit of a cold, so I might be sniffling, sneezing a little bit throughout the presentation. Please just don't even worry about it. No need to say like God bless you or anything. We'll just kind of keep going. But thank you, Gail, for reaching out and bringing me in on this. Look forward to working with you guys in the future too on it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about first the Greater Minnesota Rising Project, and there's been a little bit of confusion about what Greater Minnesota Rising was and is, and what it is that we had a research project that we gathered some funding for. We were able to hire a graduate assistant to help us with, but it was really just a one-year project. Went from 2015 to 2016 to try to figure out what are the conditions that communities can support or help develop that will allow millennials to, well, not just millennials, but really, you know, engaging leaders in their communities more easily, and also what will, you know, if they see these conditions going on, will it make it more appealing as a region to live in, to work in? So those are really, you know, what we set out to find, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more here. But just to kind of start, I want to give a little bit of, let's see here, there we go. I want to give a little bit of the background on the regions that we focused on in this research. So Northwest Minnesota, the middle chart there, that includes Region 1, which is like Cam's region. We kind of switch back and forth here. Is that, I'm not trying to switch back and forth, but are you guys still on the second page here?
We'll just have a small delay whenever you change screens. It just takes a small delay before it gets to us. Okay,
perfect. So yeah, the Northwest Planning Region, that DEED's planning region includes a lot of areas, right? A lot of different economies. So I think there's a lot of different ways to go about this work, you know, depending on what's the makeup of your economy and your communities. But for Greater Minnesota Rising, we looked at Region 5, which is Brainerd Lakes, and then all the way down to Little Falls, and then Region 4, which is West Central. So I saw we have someone from Becker County here today. Also includes Alexandria, Fergus Falls, Moorhead. And so that's where we did this research, but hopefully, other people can, look at what we did and build off it a little bit here. So part of the background why, this is an especially important issue for Greater Minnesota is the distribution of age groups in our population. We're older in Greater Minnesota in general, and in Northwest Minnesota, we have quite a bit more people above the age of 55, who don't participate in the labor force as much. And so this labor force shift or contraction or whatever you want to call it that's going to be felt statewide is going to be felt even more in Greater Minnesota. And these are just some numbers from the background of that. We have less people in the 25 to 54-year-old population range, and that's usually where labor force participation is highest. And so these are just some background as to why we thought this was an important issue. And, it's something that's being discussed around the state. I'm sure you've heard more about this, but some of the numbers behind it.
Chet?
Yeah.
Can you define what labor force, who gets counted as participating in labor force and who?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so labor force includes anybody over 16 that's working or looking for work. And so when you say anybody over 16, that would include retirees, too. And so, like I said, because we have a higher percentage of our population over 55 that appear to be participating less in our region, we had that. I feel like that labor force change, that shift, that loss that's been talked about so much in the last few years is going to be more acute in our region. And
so they could be working for themselves, or they could be employed by someone else. Either way, they're part of the labor force. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
That's right. And by looking for work, that's defined by someone that's been looking in the last month. And we have seen an increase in labor force participation in the state in the last year, and so that's encouraging. And we'll talk a little bit about the future here too, like projections, but this is what the numbers are right now. So in large part because of those numbers, we have some projections for the labor force in Northwest Minnesota from 2020 to 2030. And you can see this is broke down by age here. And, we're going to have pretty good size losses in the 55 to 64-year-old age range. That's as that big chunk of the population is moving out of the labor force because they are retiring or, other reasons, changes in the economy, perhaps their skill sets are less, viable than they were, and so they're choosing to retire early rather than learn a new skill. But we also have an increase in the 25 to 44-year-old range of about half of that loss. So we do have some increases. Also in the 20 to 24-year-old age range. But overall, we're expected to shed labor in this region. And right now we're projecting at 2% over, again, from 2020 to 2030. However, that doesn't include any migration to the region. We haven't factored that in these numbers anyway. And so this would be just kind of like a straight out, if this same population numbers are here, and at this time they have the same labor force participation rate that they do now, this is what it looks like. So in the in the state then, as far as employment goes, right now between 2014 and 2024, we're predicting 130,000 new jobs are going to be created. So that's about a 4.3% increase. In Northwest Minnesota, it's a little bit less. We're looking at about 9,000 new jobs created. And then, of course, we have the replacement openings, right? And we're projecting around 60,000 replacement openings in Northwest Minnesota too. And the important distinction between that is generally we think that replacement openings can generally be filled by labor force turnover. So usually just the natural changeover, people entering the labor force will help replenish replacement jobs. But because we don't have any growth in our labor force, the new jobs are really kind of what we need to focus on in terms of bringing in new workers, whether that's Minnesotans moving from other parts of the state, or it's immigration, immigrants coming here to help fill jobs. The 9,000 number is really what we need to think about when thinking about bringing new blood right to the region. Now, that doesn't mean we should ignore the 60,000 replacement openings, because those people obviously need to be trained in those jobs. But that's kind of a good way to look at what these numbers mean and why we separate them. So replacement openings, right? Groups like SEP and other places that are looking at incumbent training, or our community technical schools that are trying to train for people to fill these jobs. High school kids who live here now, college kids that moved here, etc. So that's kind of why we have those two different numbers. As we can see, we do have, this is a breakdown of the projections by employment versus, new jobs versus replacement jobs. Replacement jobs is going to be the big one we think about when it comes to training again, but several of these occupation categories there are going to be a lot of new jobs in there. So healthcare practitioners, there's going to be a lot of new jobs in that. Personal care and service, we've heard about that. That I think relates back to the increase in that older population sections or groups. Sales jobs are always growing. Other ones, installation, construction, community and social service. Those are all jobs that we're going to probably need to recruit people to fill. And then also some of our background research before we did Greater Minnesota Rising included Ben Winchester's work, which was on the brain gain. Originally, we looked at his research and applied his simple cohort model to our region to look at the changes. I've updated it here because we do have newer data. But this kind of shows this was from 2010 to 2015, what were the migration patterns by age group. So, we are seeing an in-migration of people 25 to 34, 35 to 44, and older. And I think the 65 to 74, a small drop off, but that's, obviously going to change as that baby boomer group moves into that age group. And so I think like Ben has said several times, there's a real opportunity for us to focus on recruiting people over the next 10 years who are going to be in this age group. And we've talked a lot about millennials today, and so we kind of said, okay, well, what ages are these people now? Right now, they are the millennials. They are the people who are, born between 1980 and 2000, approximately. And by 2024, right, when these needs are going to be the most, they're going to be in that 24 to 44-year-old age group. So I think we are actually getting ahead of it, because if we start to connect with millennials now, we have time to draw them here, fill these openings as they come up through the next decade here. A couple other points, just millennials change jobs more often, so they are more mobile, at least in their work. And so, again, this is the past, 2010 to 2015 for these age groups. Millennials aren't quite there yet in these age groups. They might be in this lower one, this 25 to 34, kind of just entering it. But then in the next 10 years, right, they'll really be entering into this 35 to 44-year-old age group. So we create the conditions now, and hopefully that sets the stage for them to look our way when they're thinking about moving to this area, like people in this age group have in the past. So that kind of leads us to Greater Minnesota Rising and the research that we did. The goal was to research the landscape in northwestern Minnesota. And again, by northwestern, I'm saying all 4 of those regions. I know it's a little confusing because you guys refer to northwest as just, regions 1 and 2. But for this purpose, it was, all 4 originally, and then we kind of scaled it back to just region 4 and 5. But it's to research the landscape in northwestern Minnesota as understood by emerging leaders and outline opportunities and strategic recommendations to connect them within and outside the region. So it's a recruitment thing. We're trying to connect with millennials outside the region, but we're also trying to retain the ones we have here. It's connecting them outside and inside. So as part of that, we did kind of a literature review, which included some of that stuff I talked about before, that data, but also on millennials, what do we know about millennials? 1 in 4 is a person of color, which is higher than previous generations. Millennials rank high in education attainment. In Minnesota, it's the 7th highest in terms of those with a bachelor's degree or higher. They're also civically engaged. They turn out big for elections, number 6 in the country in Minnesota for volunteering. But one point I got to make about this is that millennials are not as civically engaged as previous generations, but among millennials in the country, Minnesota's millennials are more engaged than other states. So that's just an important caveat to this. And then this is the one that really struck me, was how hard the Great Recession was on millennials in terms of income. Poverty rates are higher for millennials, and income is lower. So you can see that in 1980, people that were 20 to 24 years old were making 23% more in real wages than that same age group was making in 2012, right? So if you were 24 in 1980, you were likely to make a higher income than if you were 24 in 2012, right? And the same can be said if we look at this one for that higher age group. In 2012, people who are 55 to 64 are making more than those people in that age group did in 1980, right? So there's been kind of a generational shift in income that I think millennials are not. They understand that doesn't go unnoticed, right, in that generation. But as we kind of started our research, I think we ended up changing the definition of the group that we wanted to connect with and engage in the region. And we went from millennial, and it ended up changing to emerging leader. Because while, the millennials are a big part of that, we thought that there are other groups that we wanted to engage as well. So people that are switching careers, Generation X, we found is seen by both millennials and by baby boomers as a critical leadership group to shepherd in kind of millennials into the workforce and help communicate between the generations. And so we ended up using this definition as someone who possesses potential, but they're untested, and they don't have quite the experience, right? And that's really a big part of it, is the experience. So our research was three different, consisted of three phases. The first is an environmental scan. So we did one-on-one interviews with established leadership, established leaders in both Region 4 and Region 5. This also included our literature review that I kind of just discussed. Once we thought we had a good understanding of the current conditions, we moved into focus groups. We did those in Brainerd, Nisswa, and Alexandria. And we also did one in St. Paul for kind of a counter view, millennials living in the cities, because if we're trying to recruit from outside the region, we want to know what people living in the metro were thinking too. And then finally, we followed up with a World Cafe event in Fergus Falls. That helped us generate and really hone our recommendations, our final recommendations. So it's kind of moving into those recommendations. Some of the connection principles we found, and these were really fleshed out in the focus groups when we were talking to emerging leaders ourselves. And this is what they were looking for in their communities. Surprisingly, they were, really focused on face-to-face interaction. We heard a lot of that, which kind of, surprised me a little bit. I had thought that they would be want more digital connection, but what was kind of noted was that there's a lot of digital connection, and they're happy with that, but there just doesn't seem to be enough face-to-face interaction, especially with, the established community or the community that is already in place. Seems to be kind of disconnect there. So that kind of leads to intentional welcoming. Cam kind of hits one on the head. I think it's important to be welcomed by long-term residents. They need to be recruited and participated. We hear about a lot of this in millennial terms, right? They kind of need someone to reach out to them. Also, the shared experiences. This kind of goes to back when you said emerging leaders kind of lack the experience. And we noticed a real hunger, right, for more experience in their communities, but ones that they could share with each other and learn from each other on, and kind of reflect on too afterwards. And they wanted it to be around an issue or an event, something they could really sink their teeth into. There was a lot of discussion about all these networking events that have been set up specifically for networking itself. And we had a lot of focus group participants say, God, it's just so awkward, when you set up something around networking itself. And so they said they really want to issue or cause where, we can network, but it's, it's built around an issue or something like that. And then we found out that there were, a ton of different philanthropic or volunteer opportunities or, engagement possibilities that the people in the focus groups were interested in, like a wide range. So that really factored into our recommendations, thinking that whatever we're presenting for them, we need to make sure that they know there's a wide range of opportunities for them to volunteer on, so they can kind of self-select into different engagement activities, volunteer opportunities. So really, we kind of noticed as we moved along that there were two kind of themes that we're developing, both a regional and a local theme. And so our recommendations really are around aligning both a regional and a local approach in a layered engagement strategy. The regional recommendation is really how do we have a centralized hub for reaching on emerging leader events and peer groups in the area. And area can be defined however you want it. I know there's been a hub that's been developed in both Region 5 and Region 4. So it seems like the 5 to 10 county region has been what's been popping up as far as having kind of a regional approach. Also found out in our World Cafe this really helped to market a region because people are kind of looking to move to regions more than just individual cities in greater Minnesota because, you might live in a city, but you want, activities can be anywhere, in a 50-mile radius. People will be willing to drive and go do that stuff. So if you look at a region in greater Minnesota, you're likely to get as many engagement opportunities or, fun things to do as you would in the cities, right? In a smaller geographic area that's more dense, but people talk about a lot about that's okay because I won't have to wait in traffic and there are less crowds and won't have to drive to these things. But I want to know regionally what's going on, so I can, even if I'm living in Deep River Falls, I can say, okay, well, what's going on in Crookston, what's going on, in Moorhead, and so forth. And so the marketing part of that, I think, really came through in our World Cafe. And then the other part of that is the local events. So the way I we found this connected with that, if you're going to be marketing a region, you're going to be saying this place is community driven. We offer engagement and volunteer opportunities. We have resources for young families. You need to have events and resources at each local area that back up this sort of larger marketing message that the region is putting out. And so, they have to work in sync. Otherwise it can be a little bit of a bait and switch. And so, West Centrals, I know, struggled to control that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more too here. But so again, regional centralized hub for information, learning about events. Regional example I put on here. Now, from the Greater Minnesota Rising Research, we've had 2 programs that have used the recommendations to develop this regional / local plan or project. In Region 5, they've developed what's known as the Good Life. So this is kind of the regional hub of information. They're connected on Facebook. If you follow them, you get Facebook updates on a variety of different local events happening throughout the region. On this website, you can drill down to each county and even some cities in the region and find out specifically what's going on there. But in one kind of place, you can see things happening across this entire geography. Some of the barriers to the regional recommendation is that you really need the organizational support for something like this. So for Region 5, they were able to get a $100,000 grant from the National Joint Powers Alliance to implement the Good Life, and half of that went to building the website, and it'll be maintained through that grant for 5 years, I believe. So, they have secured the resources to not only set up this website, regional hub, but also to maintain it, to continue to update it for the near future here. Again, I kind of talked about you know, there'll have to be, you know, foundational work to market the hub to a target audience. You know, we've talked about, you know, how do we make sure that these hubs are showing up in web searches, like on Google. You know, I think it's really important that you have somebody who knows what they're doing as far as making sure keywords are in there. So they're showing up on search, sometimes even investing in, you know, online marketing can be helpful. And again, like the fundraising is really important to be able to sustain that for a time. The organization in Region 5 that's really has supported it and championed it has been, it's funded by NJPA, but it's really been organized by the Region 5 Economic Development. The RDO there, RDA. Obviously, with the online forum, there's a lot of opportunities to innovate, right? We can you can connect people to different professional development opportunities. You can connect local groups to, in our region, to local groups outside the region, like millennial groups or young professional groups. You could talk about, you know, what's the workforce culture like in this region, and you're not, you know, calling out a specific company or anything. You're just kind of talking about what's it like to work in healthcare in Region 5 versus the Twin Cities. You know, how does it work? How does Cuyuna, you know, Regional Medical Center differ than, you know, HCMC, you know, in Minneapolis? And so, yeah, I think you can highlight some of those cultural differences here. And then again, right, the professional development opportunities, you know, peer mentoring, different training things that pop up. I think when people move to Greater Minnesota, we learned, you know, a lot of people are concerned that their career is just not going to have the same, you know, takeoff or opportunities that it would have if they remain in the cities. And so making sure that these professional development opportunities are clear in kind of an online format, I think is really important to grabbing people's attention when they're thinking about where to put down roots. Measures of success. Again, we could talk about website analytics. You know, there's obviously a way to measure that. I think by focusing on the connection principles that I outlined in an earlier slide, diverse opportunities and diverse, not ethnically diverse in this case, but just diverse by a wide range of engagement and volunteer opportunities, cause and issue-oriented events, you know, intentional welcoming. Those things are all really important. And so kind of looking at how your programming stacks up against those principles or standards, I think is a good way to measure success. And then just, you know, some analytics, some quantitative research, you know, how many people are using the hubs, are people engaging in local events because of the regional marketing. Yeah, I think there's some good opportunities for tracking information there. Well, like I said, a lot of this is supported by a lot of the local activity that's going. So here we have like targeted emerging leader events in local, West Central, North Central, any community with a focus on organizations and community groups. And connecting these to the regional website. So in Region 5, for example, we have a young professional / emerging leader group called Lakes Ignite. And Lakes Ignite has their own page. They meet once a month for social events. All of their events are funneled up to the regional website and marketed and promoted there, so people outside the region could see, oh, there are young people in Region 5, and they are getting together. We have a Facebook feed, kind of shows videos of our events, talks about why we exist. And some of the funding so half the funding for the Good Life program went to the website. The other half went to funding local groups or local events, either one-time events or ongoing groups that were sort of carrying out this brand at the local level, right? So there are several other groups or events that shared in some of this funding that was put out as part of the Good Life programming. In total, I think $40,000 were given out to local groups or events in order to kind of, build up that substance. So what do you need? What are some barriers? Again, you need some sort of organization or group to really take a lead role in this. Sounds like there's been some really good work already done in this region in Northwest Minnesota with the Youth Advisory Committee I heard about. Also the Chamber, the Young Chamber Group. Those are great because they're already existing groups, that you can help, with. By connecting to a regional group, you can help fund them and give them maybe some direction. Opportunities, I think peer mentoring is a really good opportunity for either people that live in or outside the region to kind of inform them, okay, what's it like in a community, what's it like in our workforce. You can have some of that one-to-one connection, even for people that haven't moved here yet. And then our final recommendation is about getting employers engaged on this. And as we've started to implement the Greater Minnesota Rising recommendations into these programs, this one has become more and more clear. It's become more and more clear that this is a really important part of making these things thrive and reach, communities of potential workers outside the city or outside the region, and to allow people that live here the time and space to get involved in their communities. Found employer encouragement to participate in community events has been the #1 factor in young professionals getting out of the office and going out into their community and volunteering or engaging in different projects. We did hear from people that sometimes they feel, whether it's valid or not, before they even get involved, there's a sort of a pressure from, volunteer organizations about expectations, how much they have to do once they get involved, how much they're committed to. And having an employer kind of, help you kind of decide how much to engage can be really helpful to seeking a kind of work-life balance. And then again, how do we create meaningful experiences? So, recognizing what volunteers are doing in the community, making sure we are celebrating that kind of stuff in our business community, having employers celebrate that, which is a little bit of a shift, I think, traditionally from our business community in Greater Minnesota. Typically, employers, I wouldn't say are unsupportive, of community work, but they don't, explicitly, promote it either. So, and that's of course not across the board, but kind of a general takeaway. Opportunities for this, with employer support, employees feel more engaged in their job through volunteer opportunities, more connected in their community, feel like their networking has more of a meaning, more of a professional element to it. Again, it connects the local experience with regional marketing. So if employers are engaging, potential workers outside the region, we can connect, sort of like, here's what's happening in our community, why you should come work for us, because we support our community and we want you to support them too. And then people who are engaged more in their community are more likely to stay. And so for employers who are trying to secure a future workforce, this is a win-win kind of situation. So then as we move from theory to practice, we saw a little bit about the Good Life programming that was developed in West Central. They developed something called Live Wide Open. Some of you guys might have heard of this. Still kind of, trying to get to where we want to be with it. Right now I'm chairing the Labor Force Development Council that started Live Wide Open. And based on the Greater Minnesota Rising research, they really set on some, some target audiences based on kind of education level, age level, family size, recreation preferences. And, part of it is really, again, helping either whether it's newcomers or existing workforce find that work-life balance. They came up with some great advertising, which I thought was really clever and visually appealing. They've, launched some mobile ways to connect with people with social media. But sort of kind of the hang-up we came into is, again, engaging employers. And I think we're still trying to figure out what's the model to include employers in sort of this regional and local synchronization. So we're kind of working on that. At first, it was sort of like they wanted to use the promotion, the marketing as a fundraising tool. And so they got 10 to 15 partners who were willing to donate to the Live Wide Open program to help it keep going. They didn't get the large funding that Region 5 got, so they needed to find a way to continue to fund it. West Central is committed a pretty good amount of resources, but still really to get to where we wanted to be, they felt they needed to go further with that. But then, there was a little bit of a question of, are we losing control of this marketing? How are we connecting this to actual local things happening to make sure that this is valid, right? This is not just a tool that employers are using without having some sort of local engagement practices in their organization, or other programs that will help their new employees or their existing employees get involved in the community, or just feel welcomed, have that intentional welcoming thing. So right now, I talked to Gail and I wanted to give her a few updates about where we're at with these two programs. Again, both of these were built off the Greater Minnesota Rising research. In Region 5, like I said, they had $40,000 in local grants distributed, so about half of the $100,000 grant they got. They have funded several local events that are marketed and publicized on the regional website. They have Facebook updates to followers. Live Wide Open has found several local partners to help them, or I should say regional partners, to help them fund the programming, but it's kind of got, again, that kind of, in some ways they gave up control a little bit of that. And so we're kind of reevaluating it now to see how we could engage players and actually the substance, right, of that marketing message more. We developed a marketing toolkit so it'd be easy for them to take the marketing materials, the ads, and cross-advertise Live Wide Open on their website, and vice versa. We can put some nods to these different partners on our website. And then right now we're also developing other employment engagement tools for partners. So one idea that came up is, well, we want our partners to have be able to set up a diversity committee at their establishment if they can, talking about millennials, again, 1 in 4 are persons of color. You know, and if we're recruiting more people of color, we want to make sure we're intentional about welcoming them, making sure they have the resources that they need as a community or as a group, you know, to engage in what's historically a pretty white community. Also, you know, we thought, okay, well, if they want to set up a diversity committee, they might be excited about it, but a lot of employers said, well, how do we even do that? You know, how do we go about that? So we're trying to develop the tools, the kit, the training to help them do that. I think the extension community could be really important in helping develop some of that training for regional employers. Other ideas we talked about having, you know, mentorship programs like community mentorship programs. So someone who has been engaged in the community for a long time, talking to newcomers or emerging leaders about all the work they've done in their communities, how to get involved, what the culture of, you know, volunteerism and community work is all about. So kind of a community mentorship program. We thought that, and we've spitballed a number of other ideas that we can, other ways we can help employers create this programming for their new and existing emerging leader employees. And then finally, we talked about this a little bit, Gail and I did. Ben Winchester, whose research really kind of set the groundwork for the Greater Minnesota Rising research, has now, they landed a really nice grant from the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And Ben and a group of researchers from the extension are now going to really try to further their research about how do we draw these sort of emerging leaders, millennials, into, you know, Greater Minnesota and get them to be parts of the workforce. And so again, it's, you know, furthering his brain gain research. One big takeaway from Ben's research was, hey, these people we do have some people in this mid-professional range that are moving here. So how do we encourage that to continue? And we might be able to draw even more people here if we're actually active about it, because we're not even that active about it at this point, and we've seen in-migration amongst that age group. So the last month they convened a statewide advisory committee. I've been invited to be a part of that, which I'm excited about based on some of the work we've done so far in the region. And then next year, it sounds like these researchers are going to be traveling to parts of Greater Minnesota, talking to different community development groups or resilient community groups, and asking them, you know, what are they doing at this point? What are some of the unique challenges for their geographic when it comes to engaging and retaining emerging leaders or millennials? And so that's great for them to come out to Greater Minnesota. I think that's really important. Just like millennials, I think a lot of people in Greater Minnesota appreciate when you know, organizations from the state or from the university come to them, you know, and ask them, you know, what is their feeling about this, and what ways would they like to move forward on it. And so that should be great. I made a recommendation that they engage through the RSDP's resilient community groups that are already established who are working on this, because I thought that was an excellent format to have these conversations. Being that I'm part of one in the Central, when Gail reached out to me, I thought, wow, this seems to really align well, because I see so much of our work moving in that direction at the RSDPs. And so I'm looking forward to working with them, and hopefully some of what they come up with in their further research will help us continue to build the programming that has been established, or, you know, help other areas that haven't really got anything going to set something up. So that is the end of my presentation. I got some questions, comments. Looks like we got about 15 minutes. If you guys have questions for me, I do have to step off at 1:30. Sounds like you have some time to talk amongst yourselves then. But if you guys have questions for me, I'd like to hear what you guys think about our research, and if there's anything you think else I can help you understand or give you insight on.
Sure. This is a little, maybe it's a little technical. I'm curious how the branding message was developed, from a 6 or 8 county region to the Good Life or Live Wide Open, was how, not just sort of who helped, I guess, what was the engagement process to help identify what those messages were and how that branding came about?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question, and I didn't really address that. So in West Central, the Live Wide Open was developed through their Labor Force Development Council. Within that council, we convened a separate marketing committee to think about how we want to market the region. In that committee, we had people from throughout the region. So we had members from Alexandria, Fergus Falls, Detroit Lakes, Moorhead, to come and talk about, okay, I know we have a really diverse region in terms of its economy. West Central especially is different. We've got several different employment hubs, and so we're like, how do we get something that we think we can all really get on board with, And so we probably met over the course of, I want to say, 4 to 5 months, probably 4 or 5 different days. Talked about what are the things that we identify with, what do we like about the region, and the catch phase really just came to us naturally from there. We thought it had some neat kind of double meanings. Live wide open. Sometimes when you're out on your boat, you got your engine wide open. You're flying. Just the wide open spaces, right? Less traffic, less congestion, kind of thing. And then we used some of our funding to hire a marketing group to help us develop out from there. They looked at the Greater Minnesota Rising research to identify target audiences they wanted to focus on. And so that was the process in that area. And if you want more information about that, I can definitely send you some stuff or connect you with Sherry Holm over at West Central, because she was kind of the point there. In Region 5, it was developed through what's called the Economic Development Pros Group. So the Region 5 Commission has a small committee of all the economic development agencies in Region 5. So you have one from Crow Wing, Cass, Medina, Todd, and Morrison, who each meet on a quarterly basis to talk about, give updates on what's happening in their area. And then this idea came up of how do we market, as a region. We've seen other parts of the state doing it. And then the opportunity from NJPA came up with their funding. And so, again, we used the Greater Minnesota Rising Research to draw up a grant application. We actually got the funding before we had even had a name for the regional, the marketing plan. We ended up hiring a company called Golden Shovel, a local company out of Little Falls, to develop the website. They had a lot of experience in that region. So then after we got the funding, we got a lot of guidance from Golden Shovel to help us kind of build out the regional website. But in both of these, I feel like there's more work that can be done, especially around the employee engagement side of things. So, employer engagement, excuse me. Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
I have a question I'd like to put out to Cam and Ronnie and maybe Nate and Andrew too, who kind of work in this economic development field. what do you see as you think about other regions around the state actively marketing their region? You know, that that just there might be good reasons to do this just because the region has sort of an identity, but I also sort of think how does the fact that there are regions marketing themselves change strategies in regions 1 and 2, for example.
This is Nate. I don't know that I've seen it on a regional level as much as on a city level. I know Bemidji, Roseau, and Park Rapids have either already completed branding projects and studies or are starting to do that. But I haven't really seen it on a regional level in Region 1 or 2. Maybe CAM has, but. And a lot of those, I would say, are towards capturing the tourism that is visiting and also working towards keeping those that may be visiting, keeping them involved as like a workforce. It could be potential workers in the labor force.
This is Ronnie. I would agree with Nate that I see it on a much more happening up here on a community level or a county level. One of the spin-offs from Ben Winchester's work has been our newest program offering, which is called Making It Home, which is a program that is designed off of a similar program in Missouri that's called Marketing Hometown America. And I've had a couple of communities interest, but they haven't taken the bite yet, partly because of where they're at in their own organization, but also just because they just don't feel ready for it yet due to staffing capacity or whatever the question may be.
Well, you know, one way I can see where you guys are coming from because, you know, especially West Central, historically a lot of these employment centers competed against each other for workers and businesses especially. And, you know, we kind of saw that that was going to be a potential barrier, right, to them wanting to work together. But I think with some of Ben's research and some of our research found, you know, again, that when people are looking to move to the region, they do look, they are intrigued by the regional component to it because, you know, that gives them more, not every small town is going to have everything that everybody's looking for, but you build it out, you have more opportunities for a wider, you know, group of people to move and live to wherever they work. They still got a lot more opportunities for recreation and life. And when we did the St. Paul focus group, we were surprised by how few of like the cities in northwest Minnesota really even stood out to them. A lot of them had never been to Bemidji. They had never been to Thief River Falls or really anywhere close to it. And so for them, you know, they were kind of like, well, up there is just kind of like up north. You know, it almost already had like a regional brand to it, you know. And we were like, well, how do we address that? So we thought about that when we were talking about making sure that our regional pages show up in like Google searches. So you might have somebody that searches, okay, jobs in Bemidji, right, or recreation in Bemidji, and we would want the regional hub to show up in that, so that someone could see, oh, Bemidji is here, and there's stuff going on in Bemidji, but it's also part of this region where there's a lot of other things going on too. So that's just some thoughts from some of the marketing. There's some of the focus groups we had. I hope that makes sense.
Chet, I think it does. It's difficult to maybe get the communities to start thinking that way. because they're so interested in promoting themselves. So.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody says that a local community shouldn't promote themselves. I guess the hardest thing is just trying to convince people that's not an and or thing. You know, we can do both, and that will help. You know, attract more attention. Even more attention. So.
Yeah, I was struck with your early in your talk, Chet. You said that it's important to have the services or the product to back up the claim. You know, the marketing message, and Nate's sort of tying those three communities, Bemidji and Roseau and Park Rapids. In each of those cases, it's the tourism product that's sort of the lead. So they're, as individual communities at least, they're, you know, their marketing message is backed up with the product that they have, which gets, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. The, you know, claiming, seems like the marketing message has a lot to do with the sort of that whole quality of life, all the factors that might make someone think this would be a great place to live. So the recreation ones are maybe, you know, those are the things that we promote anyway. Things like schools and you know, other services are a little trickier to say we have it. You know, they fluctuate. It's just a little more problematic than the lake,
yeah,
the river.
And again, there's a lot of good things happening that I think already kind of give substance to the message. But if you're marketing to millennials or emerging leaders, you want to make sure that if you haven't developed some programming specifically for them, you also need to do that, and then that should be backing up, you know, sort of the regional marketing too, if you're targeting that group, you know. So.
Time for one more.
This is Cam. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Cam.
I've actually tried to interject here about 3 or 4 times, and I found out that I was off the line. So at any rate, I just wanted to mention that we had started doing some regional branding efforts back about 15 years ago. And, you know, we came up with Land of the Dancing Sky, which we wanted to not only make a regional brand out of, but also make it something where it was like a hub for excellence in terms of manufacturing and that type of thing. So if your product was built and it's got a Land of the Dancing Sky sticker on it, you know, that was, you know, something that made it hopefully more attractive and something that people wanted. It went for a while, but it didn't go, you know, anywhere near what we thought it could. And it seems like the marketing efforts that are coming about now are more along the lines of action-oriented things. So live wide open sounds like you're doing something, and, you know, get rural sounds like you're doing something, and that type of thing. So maybe needs to be a change in message and a change in how we go about attacking this thing, but we're kind of in the midst of developing some marketing messages right now at the RDC. It hasn't been on a regional effort. We've been doing it internally here to just try and figure out what it should look like and how we can do it and that type of stuff. But, you know, it's one of those things where if you're going to do website development and if you're going to do marketing and if you're going to have somebody that's actively doing the work of updating Facebook and the rest of your social media, you know, that takes bucks. And we got to figure that out as well. So.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying about having kind of a region of excellence thing. And I also think that just because there's nothing been developed at this point is not like a negative thing. I think that, like Live Wide Open, for example, you know, it's been around for probably a year and a half now, and really has gone through some growing pains. I mean, it's, you know, a lot of people have, you know, kind of thrown their hat into how we're going to do this regional marketing thing, and a lot of it's kind of trial and error. So if you could take some of the lessons learned by these early efforts, right, and capitalize on that, I think you're actually in almost a better position than some of the ones that are trying to, you know, already change what they're doing. And so I like the Region of Excellence thing a lot. You know, I think you got a message about, you know, your strength in manufacturing, you know, if you're trying to especially attract people with those type of skills. I think that's something you definitely want to highlight. And if you can get employers involved, you know, at the ground level, I think that would really be huge. That's one of the things that we found is just you almost need to have to make these things really work in a workforce development way, is to have employers engaged on this. So. Okay, thanks a lot, Linda. Thanks, Gail, for having me. You guys follow up with me anytime, call me, email me, whatever. I'll send this. You have the presentation, so.
Yes, we have both the slides you sent and this recording, so we got you.